Hey there, welcome to the Millennial Book Junkie. My name is Monique, and today I'm going to be reviewing Liz Moore's God of the Woods. This book was 476 pages long. It is much longer than books that I typically read, which hover around, 370 to 420 pages max. So this one was a little bit longer. It was a little bit intimidating, but I plowed through it in about a week. I am a slower reader, so I was really proud of myself for getting through this in about a week, and let's talk about it. This book, I would say, would fall under the genre of literary fiction and also maybe like mystery and maybe some crime fiction. There were also some suspenseful times, so I'm not sure it falls under one specific genre, but I would compile all of those genres to talk about this one because this book seems to fall into all those genres that I just listed. This book completely pulled me out of my day-to-day reality and into the woods in the 1970s. It's got secrets, it's got power, it's got privilege. We are following the disappearance of two children from a summer camp in the 70s, and each disappearance was 15 years apart. If you love multi-perspective mysteries with rich character development, you will most likely enjoy this book. The God of the Woods is about a young girl named Barbara Van Laar who disappears in the 1970s from a summer camp that her family owns. But Barbara's disappearance isn't the first for this particular summer camp because her brother, Bear, disappeared from the same summer camp in 1961. So just about, 14, 15 years prior to Barbara's disappearance, her little brother disappeared as well. Now, the novel unfolds over several different perspectives. There's a ton of characters in this book, but I would say there's about 7 key characters who we get the perspectives for. They are Alice, the mother of Bear and Barbara who go missing. There's Tracy. She's the friend of Barbara's at summer camp. It's her really good friend. So when Barbara goes missing, we get Tracy's perspective. We also get Victor's perspective, he was the camp director in the 1960s when Bear went missing. We get Judita's perspective, which they call her Judy. I think the name is Polish, but we get Judy's perspective as well. She is the investigator who is investigating Barbara's disappearance in the 70s. We also get Carl's perspective, and Carl is the volunteer firefighter who helps look for Bear in the 1960s. We get Louise's perspective, and Louise is the camp counselor at Camp Emerson when Barbara goes missing. And we also get Jacob's perspective, and Jacob is this killer in the 60s who is in jail in the 70s, and he actually escapes and he's like walking towards the camp. And so this is we also get his perspective as well. Now, each perspective in this book reveals like a new layer to the story. It reveals like a new piece to the puzzle. Because as you're trying to figure out what happens to these two kids, Barbara and Bear, we get these differing perspectives. We never get Bear's perspective, we never get Barbara's perspective, but we get all these different perspectives from all these different people and throughout different timelines to see and put the puzzle together as to what happened to Barbara and what happened to Bear based on what these characters are doing, what they're lying about, who they're sleeping with, what they're going through. And little by little, as you make your way through the book, you slowly uncover what happened to Barbara and what happened to Bear through the lens of these 7 main characters. Now, this book absolutely, had me extremely immersed. I felt completely just in this camp with these people. It dives into a lot of the expectations of women in the 1970s. There's themes of privilege and power and influence because the Van Laars had all this power. There was a ton of Van Laars, this family that owned the summer camp. So there was 3 Peter Van Laars, okay? So the 3rd Peter Van Laar is the one who owns it in the present day when Barbara goes missing in the 1970s. So you kind of get this connection between the power of the Van Laars and then the blue collar community below that basically, is working for the Van Laars, and you have this privilege that they have and the way you see the way that they treat the people that they would consider beneath them. And it's really, really interesting. And I really love how it's kind of like a coming of age story for a lot of different women in the book. My favorite character, I think, was Judy. She was the investigator, and I really liked her because she was the only woman on the force in 1975 when this was happening, and she really had to work hard to show her worth. And a lot of people were like, oh, you know, like, what do you know? Like, why don't you go interview the kids? You know, you're a woman. And, you know, and even some of the people she was interviewing when she was investigating the missing Barbara, they didn't take her seriously either. They were like, let me talk to your boss, you know. So, but I really liked her because she had a lot of resilience. She was always pushing and trying to prove her worth, and eventually doing so in the actions that she took. And, you know, she would, you know, investigate on her own and follow her hunches. And she actually had a partner named Denny Hayes in the book that I really liked because he was really good at like cheering her on and helping her through, which I thought was really great. So I really liked her character. I also felt really bad for Alice, and Alice was the wife of Peter Van Laar III. She was also the mom of Bear and Barbara. And Alice, from her perspective, she marries Peter Van Laar III when she's 18 and he's 29. She goes into this rich family, and, you know, she immediately has a little boy named Bear who she loves. But she ends up just falling into a depression. She ends up taking pills, and she tries to self-soothe with alcohol, and she just kind of becomes a shell of a woman. And, you know, her husband just treats her like crap, and, you know, it's really sad to see her deteriorate like slowly through the years, especially after her young son Bear goes missing. And then when Barbara goes missing, it's just really hard to read some of the pages that talk about what happens to Alice, and, you know, how she really turns to drugs and alcohol to help her cope. It's just kind of like a really sad degradation of her character as the book unfolds, and she was the one I just felt really, really bad for throughout. And I also liked Barbara's character. So Barbara is the 13 or 14-year-old girl who goes missing, and I really liked her character because she was really smart, she was really curious, she wasn't mean, she dressed kind of like gothy, like punk vibe, she liked punk music, and not a lot of people knew what punk music was back then. And she basically made a statement with what she wore, and she really was confident in who she was and what she enjoyed. And her friend Tracy at the camp, they had a really close relationship, and I was glad that it wasn't one of those like relationships where Barbara's got all this money and she just treats everyone like crap. Like, her and Tracy's relationship ended up being really sweet, and I just really enjoyed reading about them together as they were going on like survival trips, you know, with the summer camp. And I just thought Barbara was a really interesting character because she was essentially her parents' second favorite child, right? So after Bear went missing, her brother, in the 60s, they decided to have Barbara to like fill the gap, fill the hole in their lives. And so when she came along, you know, she wasn't really loved as much as Bear was. And so she kind of had to forge her own path. And I really appreciated that the character that she became was not, you know, just like her parents or just like her father, I would say. She was very curious and smart, and yeah, I just really liked her character a lot. I feel like Barbara surprised me. I also really enjoyed how like each character's story was like another part of the mystery. Like, you had to get the backstory on Alice to kind of know the situation in the house. And the house they lived in, the Van Laars, which was on the summer camp property, because basically they owned like this huge preserve, and like the summer camp was on the property. And so I really liked how at the house where they lived, the Van Laars, I really liked how Alice's backstory really spoke to, you know, the vibe that was going on between her and her husband and the people that worked for them, and the husband and the people at the camp. And so everyone's character, like, and their story kind of really told the story and helped you solve, you know, the disappearance of Bear and Barbara. So I really liked that aspect of it, because even though there was a lot of characters and there was a lot of backstory and a lot of good character development, I just felt, you know, like everyone was kind of like a key into learning a little bit more about this disappearance and what happened to Barbara and Bear. I also really enjoyed Liz Moore's writing because it wasn't too flowery. It was descriptive and sharp, and also quick. Like, there were some parts where I could read it quickly. Like, she didn't spend too much time describing the woods in a very poetic way, which I know is sometimes hard not to do because the woods are very poetic. The puppy wants to say hello. Okay, the puppy had to say hello. So yeah, I really appreciated that she didn't get too poetic about the woods. I felt like I could quickly read it and not have to stop too much and think about it. And I felt like she could have gotten a lot very poetic about certain things, and I'm just glad that she didn't, because sometimes you just want to get on with the story, you know, especially when there's disappearances involved and you keep getting little unlocks about what happened to them, and then you're just hungry for more and more and trying to figure out what the heck happened to these kids. You don't want to stop and think about, you know, 18 ways to write about the sun or the leaves. You know what I'm saying? So while I really loved the character development and the backstories of everything, there were a few times in this book where I was like, oh my gosh, do I really need to read a whole chapter about Louise's backstory with her ex-boyfriend, you know, and that whole thing, you know, I just want to know what happened to these kids. Now, I know that like every chapter, you know, sheds light on new things, so I know why things were included, but there were times when I felt like the backstory was just too long, and I was like, I don't feel like going back in the past, especially because it jumps between 1961 and 1975 when Barbara goes missing and Bear was missing in 1961. So sometimes I was like really into like what was going on with Bear, but then it would jump back to 1975 and I was like, ugh, I just don't feel like going into all this backstory, you know? So that was one thing that did bother me. As much as I loved learning about the characters, I felt like it could have been just a little bit reined in. But you know, obviously it was important to the story, so I know why it was added. But there is a point where in the book is almost 500 pages that you just kind of get a little tired. So that's one of the things that I would say, yeah, that wasn't my favorite. The other thing that really I thought was interesting about this book is that I was trying to reconcile the title with the story. Now, the title, The God of the Woods, is mentioned once in this book, but I couldn't really like reconcile why that had to be the title. I love it as the title, but I felt like while they were in the woods, you know, they were at summer camp, it just didn't feel like the woods played a super huge role. I mean, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but like I just felt like the story was more about the people. And while there was some atmospheric woodsy vibes and feelings for sure, I'm not sure how the title plays really into the story. I mean, I can guess at a few things, but I just felt a little bit like the woods were secondary. The woods were just the atmosphere, you know, and maybe that's on purpose, but I felt like the story was really about the characters. And I just, yeah, I thought a little bit about like how the title made sense with the story, and I wasn't quite sure, but I do love the title. So, you know, I go back and forth. I will also say, do not listen to this as an audiobook because you will find yourself rewinding and getting very confused. There are too many characters, there are too many timelines. Each chapter, when you read it in the book version, shows you like 1961, 1975, day one, 1975, day two, but it shows the whole timeline at the beginning of every chapter, so you always know where you're at in the story. I can't even imagine listening to this as an audiobook, to be honest, especially with so many characters. So if you haven't read this, I would highly recommend checking it out at the library or, you know, picking up the physical copy, because the audiobook I feel would be tough unless you're used to that, which is great. But I am usually, you know, I usually get the physical copies of books, and I just really enjoyed how I could always keep track of what was going on. I don't know if you can see, but like in it, she has 1950, 61, winter, June, like she puts it all like here, you know? in the book. So yeah, I don't know. It was easy to follow along that way, so I wouldn't recommend listening to this one on audio just because it might get a little confusing. Overall, I just feel like it was a very slow burn mystery that kind of keeps you on your toes. I mean, the first few chapters, the first, I don't know, third of the book is like, okay, you know, everything's getting set up. Then it really starts getting good, like after the halfway point, you start feeling a little suspense, like what's gonna happen next. And I always, just like with The Quiet Tenant, which I read, I always feel like I watch so many movies and like there's a part in those types of books where like I just hear the suspenseful music in my head as I'm reading it. I hear like a clock ticking, like, oh my God, I'm getting to this point of something's gonna happen. And like, this book definitely had that. It had its suspenseful moments because you knew something was gonna happen in that chapter. You were gonna learn something mind-blowing, and I really love that about this book. So if you like suspenseful books, if you like books with, you know, rich character development, you like mysteries that are kind of a slow burn, and maybe you're going on a camping trip and you just want something for the woods, I would definitely pick up this book. I mean, I really, really liked it. I've heard some people that are like, about it. I really like this one. I liked it more than All the Colors of the Dark, to be honest. That was the last like huge book that I read, and I thought this one was gonna be like that, and I was a little scared with all the characters and the timelines and how big it was, but no, I really liked this one. I was able to follow, and I didn't feel like it was too long, and I like this one a little more than that one. So I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I really, really enjoyed this one, and there were a lot of great lines that I underlined too, so if you have a chance, you should really pick it up. I really, really liked it. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope that you have a really good week or weekend whenever you're watching this. And let me know in the comments if you have read this book. What did you think about it? Maybe you hated it, or maybe you loved it. So let me know what you think, and like and subscribe if you like videos like these, and I will see you next time. Bye!